humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 224, and I had a conversation with my dear friend Mark Islam. He is Los Angeles based, and this conversation took place in May, so right around the beginning of the shutdown. And this episode is really all about the interesting people Mark has met. He knows everyone. It's crazy. He knows everyone and has such great stories. And he tells a couple stories on this, and he's delightful. He refers to a couple movies that he had seen. They're Belgium movies. The one he talked about was The Ardennes, and he couldn't remember the name of the other one. And it's called The Broken Circle Breakdown. So I just wanted to cover that because he brought it up and couldn't remember the name. Speaking of which, of course, things that we talk about in episodes, I'm going to have all the things on the links page that we refer to for you to go and check out there on heyhumanpodcast.com. I wanted to bring up something. I did a project with my friend Sammy under the name Muskrats, Muscratz, and it's a little encouragement to get people out to vote. It's a song that we wrote and we made a video for, and there's a YouTube for it, so definitely go check that out. It is not safe for work, although since everybody works at home, I suppose you get to watch it at work because working is now in your home office. So it's got swear words in it. So nothing too crazy, but just a heads up about that. And I'll put a link to that as well there on the links page. Usual stuff, social media, Hey Human Podcast can be found on Instagram and Facebook. My personal social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram is Susan Ruthism. You can find out more about me at susanruth.com and join the mailing list. And that website, susanruth.com, of course, has my music and art and all that kind of fun stuff and acting things and this, that, and the other. You can email me, Susan at heyhumanpodcast.com. Send me ideas for shows or say hi, that kind of thing. Please do that. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes. There is a contribute button on the heyhumanpodcast.com website. This is an ad-free podcast. If you feel like helping to contribute to keep this show going, please do so there, and I appreciate that very much. I already mentioned the links page. There's a section for every episode that has ever been on Hey Human, and I curate that specifically to bring you lots of other information on top of the episode itself. There's merch now, Hey Human merch. So if you have always wanted to have that Hey Human merch, or maybe some of my artwork on a t-shirt or on a note card or a bag or whatever, definitely go check that out. You can find it on the heyhumanpodcast.com website, again, on the merch button, and be taken to Art of Wear where you can do some shopping. So that's awesome. Very excited about that new thing. I'm super excited for next week's episode. It's with Dr. Erin McDonald. She's an astrophysicist and she consults for Star Trek, which is so freaking cool. What a brain. What a nice woman. I really enjoyed the conversation. So I'm excited for you to hear that on episode 225. We are trucking along on these. Okay, that's it. Let's get into this. Thank you for listening, everyone. Stay safe, be well, love you, and yeah, here we go. Mark Islam, it is delightful to see you. Welcome to Hey Human.
Well, thank you for having me on Hey Human. It is delightful to see you as well.
It's been too long. I missed you.
Well, I miss you back. I think that we met almost a year ago, and almost a year ago you were in the process of coming to LA, and we went to do some music things together and some improv things together, and kind of thought that was how the rest of the year would take form, and now we're stuck at home. It's nice to chat with you. Like, really, one of the last times I was out actually, no, the very last time I was out with you, which was to see that country band from Nashville when Octavia Spencer and Allison Janney were also in that little club.
That's right. My friend Danny Myrick and his buddy Travis Howard have a fantastic band, and that was the best night. Oh my God, I danced my ass off.
Yeah, I know, and that was the last time anybody went out, I think.
Yeah, and Octavia was so nice. She's a lovely lady. They all were up on the dance floor dancing. Allison Janney can cut a rug. What?
I know.
Fellow tall girl out there moving it, busting the moves. I love it. And the guy that I was dancing with a lot, that's apparently after the night was over, my friend Meg, who's married to Danny, she said, "Do you know who you were dancing with most of the night?" I said, "No." She said, "Oh, that's Kix Brooks' son." I was like, I had no idea. If you're listening out there in the world, you're a great dancer. It was super fun. And he taught me some cool moves that I didn't know. So
that's right.
What a fun night. Well, it's good to see you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in real life again as well. What I love about you so much, and it speaks to what you were just talking about, how when we met because mutual friends of ours told me I should meet you because you're here in LA, and you were so kind and gracious, and we met for coffee, and immediately fell madly in love with you. I just think you're the best, and you were so open and loving, and immediately wanted to introduce me to people, and it's a rare quality.
LA, I know what it's like. I moved to LA in 1990, and I didn't know a soul. And I didn't really have I didn't have much direction, except I kind of knew that I wanted to write songs, I wanted to sing, and I wanted to be around musicians. But I didn't know anybody. So when I came to LA, I stayed, in a motel. I didn't even know anybody to stay on their couch. And I stayed, in a motel for like a week or two until I found an apartment. And then, I just started to meet people, but it's not that easy in LA. So I have a big sort of sense of obligation when newcomers come up to LA, because it is so daunting, just the whole, how spread out it is and how spread out everybody else is. And, I know what it's like to be the new kid in town. And so, yeah, I also had an interest in what your trajectory was going to be. Because what is your story arc, from arriving here, getting situated, in a living situation, and going about the things that you were setting about, like Second City, which I thought was a brilliant, because I tell people all the time to do improv training, even if they're not interested in like acting or comedy or anything like that, because I just think it would, even though I've never done it.
You should. They're doing online classes right now during the shut-in, so
yeah.
Thinking very quickly on your feet is a good skill to have. Oh, that's a beautiful... Is that in your backyard, or is it the neighbor's yard behind you? There's a beautiful purpley...
Well, that's the neighbor's yard behind.
Okay.
Adjacent. The neighborhood is called Rainier Village. It's sort of adjacent to Culver City, sort of adjacent to Beverlywood. It's like around the 10 freeway at Robertson.
Beverlywood. I love that.
Yeah, kind of. Well, I love Beverlywood.
So let's get into your beginnings. Where did you grow up, and childhood type stuff? Did you have aspirations way back about music and things like that, or what shaped you along the way?
Well, where I grew up in Newcastle, Delaware. I grew up in the 70s, and I was very much into radio and music and my records, and learning songs and learning piano at first and then guitar. I'm not really sure that I had musical aspirations, but I loved certain figures who, taught me, just by listening to their records, I learned a lot about music. But my actual, I guess, high school, I thought I was going to end up being a high school English teacher. And that sort of began, like, when I was going to school, when I was going to college, those were all my essays were about, I'm going to major in English and I'm going to teach high school English, which I suppose if I would have done, I might be sort of, early retirement at this point. I might be.
You would have been a great English teacher. You would have been a fun one to have.
I probably should have done that. I never did do it. I did take the credential for out here, but I never did do it. I came out here. I started. The 90s. I mean, when I moved out here, like I said, I didn't know anybody when I got out here. I had my guitar. I had, this briefcase of songs, that I had written, and, some I tried to record. And I was just, setting about trying to, network and also to play, perform, to get better. And it was a different scene than it is now. Like when I got to LA, it wasn't like the 70s where it was the hoot night at the Troubadour, but there was a songwriter scene. And on any given night of the week, you could go out and you could open mic, you could, see great songwriters perform, great acoustic acts. It was just, and we traveled around in packs, like through the 90s. And a lot of people ended up moving to Nashville in the mid-90s. I started going there, but I never, I never fully lived there. I would stay there for periods of time.
What made you move to Los Angeles in the first place?
Well, what made me move was I was going to write songs.
Oh, okay. So that was the plan.
It was really music. It was really music. And then it's a nutty time. I first, through the 90s, I was an office temp. I was an envelope stuffer. I was, a film extra, an audience person. And, I was just also out there doing music, and I was recording on, making my demos. And, then the internet came along and made it so that you could put out your own CDs. And, you didn't necessarily need to have a gatekeeper. And, so that's kind of what I was doing, and that's what I did do. I made 2 albums on my own, and then when the shelf life of those was over, I started working in television. So, in the OOs, I got a job as a transcriber on the Dr. Phil show, the first season of it. And that kind of was my beginning in learning about broadcast, from the other side, which was, what was a little nutty is that, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I went to see some psychic in Nashville when I was there, because I was doing theater in Nashville, and everybody was booking appointments with this British lady who was in town, and she would read you. So I sat with her, and she held my wristwatch, and she said, I see you working on a long, I see you working not in front of the camera, behind the camera, and I see you on a really long running show, which was so crazy because I had not done anything yet. And I actually thought the show, when I got that sort of out of the blue offer to do Dr. Phil, which was so entry level, transcribing on the graveyard shift, I thought, well, okay, this might be the long running show. But then actually, as it turned out, that show would be The Amazing Race that I am working on.
And how did you get into that? Because you've been in that a long time, yeah?
Craigslist. I got that job from Craigslist.
No way.
I had been, right before that, I had been working on a reality show it profiled people who'd been addicted and who had gotten their lives together. It was called A Second Look, and it ran on Style Network. And I was only supposed to be on it for about like 3 months, and I ended up working on it, until the end. And then I had nothing happening, and I answered a Craigslist ad for something really entry level, transcribing again, and I took it, and I loved it. Like, that job was like, traveling without leaving my seat. I was just watching people race around like Iceland or Senegal or, just kind of, I thought it was really educational. I loved it. And then I ended up, staying for a long time, in different capacity.
Yeah, and you were about to start the new season when all this happened.
I was about to start. I know, I was telling you about it. You and I were coming back from Santa Barbara to where we saw J.D. Selder together.
Yeah.
And I was getting so excited to be going back to work. And we would have been starting season 33, I believe.
That's extraordinary. 33.
I know. And then they called me like 2 days later and said, don't come in, because they've halted production. So I suppose I should have taken it, the whole COVID thing, maybe a little more seriously than I did, because, that would have demonstrated just how serious it is if they actually halted production. But at that time, I was thinking it might be a couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't think anybody knew.
Back.
Yeah.
And I had no idea it would be months of living like this. I don't know what's going to happen with the state of production. Yeah, and I think that maybe it is just going to teach everybody to get back to fundamentals and get back to basics and learn how to bake.
I heard people were running out of flour because everyone...
You can't find... Well, I don't know now, but I had a hard time finding flour.
Yeah. Flour
and I'm not even baking. I just ran out,
Yeah.
But everybody is baking, and apparently the social influencers now are the people who teach you how to bake. So.
We live in a very strange world. People say, we'll never go back to normal, but I was thinking about this earlier today, that it's not our first pandemic rodeo in the world. We've had others, and things do eventually go back to normal. We forget that we're in the panic and the fear part of it, that things do go back. After the Black Plague, after the 1918 flu, after, eventually things even out. They find their equilibrium.
Yeah. That's what everybody's hoping.
Yeah.
Like in 2020, I thought I was going to be sitting like in a lot of film festivals or working or, in the American Cinematheque or in different concert halls or whatever. Like, I had no idea that I would be talking about second waves of things that might coincide with next season's flu. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is. It's weird. It's very weird. Well, let's get back to you.
Life used to be more interesting. That's very interesting, but life used to be a different kind of interesting.
It's true. And I do believe it'll get back there, and hopefully the distrust and the anger and the craziness will also abate, I hope. I like to say...
Well, that's the sad thing to see, is the distrust of information. The distrust of expertise, the distrust of academia, the distrust of all... That is very hard to take, because that actually often has me feeling like I'm the crazy one.
Wait, you're not the crazy one?
Like, I would like to think that I'm not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time wondering if, in fact, how do I have all this wrong?
Sure. It's like the whole country is gaslighting us.
Yeah, well, I just recently saw that movie, because now we have so much time. I have disappeared into a Turner Classic Movies rabbit hole.
Oh, I forgot that was a movie. That's
that's a movie, and that's where that expression comes from.
I always forget that.
Yeah, and she gets gaslit by her husband. You know, she's the one who actually has the money and the power, and he like kind of has her second guessing her every single intention until she's, you know.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my dating history has prepared me for this.
Yeah.
So it's okay.
I am curious what this is going to do for dating.
Yeah, me too.
Last night I was watching this thing on, like, is there going to be a coronavirus baby boom? And I just can't think of a less erotic time. You know, like, I can't think of a time where people are, like, are less in the mood, you know.
I don't know. I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. I'm so in the mood.
Well, I think it's just kind of like if just the joblessness, uncertainty. I mean, for having a child, being in the mood, yeah.
I'm not in the mood for having a child, but I'm in the mood for the things. Yeah.
I get you.
For practicing, for sure, but not for actually having. For going through the motions, as it were.
I mean, at this point, I don't even want to have seasonal allergies.
Oh gosh, I know.
Like a baby.
We need the gerbil from the boy in the gerbil ball from the boy in the bubble. We just go out in these giant.
We're all the boy in the bubble now.
I mean, I think so. All right, let's get back to you. Did you grow up in a creatively supportive family, or were they more academic?
I grew up in a very academic family. My father was a doctor, and my brother, who was 3 years older, was very smart, and he became a doctor. But he was the one who, he was the one who set the bar, my older brother. So I had a lot to live up to because I was his younger brother. And I lived up somewhat. I didn't live up entirely because, he was straight A. I was not quite straight A. But I didn't grow up in the kind of house that sang at the dinner table or, necessarily, I didn't grow up in a creative house. I grew up in a more scientific house, I think. And my father was from Bangladesh. He was an immigrant to this country. So, it's not like he was going to be introducing me necessarily to the music of Hank Williams or any of those people. But, he did give me a piano and piano lessons, and he did give me a guitar and guitar lessons. So I guess it was creatively supportive that way. And I sang in the chorus and choirs and things. So it was supportive that way. But if I had been engaged in sports, they would have been supportive that way too. Like, I liked roller skating for a number of years in the 70s, and so I did a lot of that. And they were always around for that, or the swim team and things. So, I mean, I had a pretty traditional suburban childhood.
Did you go to the roller rinks?
I went to the roller rinks, and that's why when we saw J.D. Souther, so many memories of being at the roller rink, the Christiana roller rink, and hearing either You're Only Lonely by him or any of those songs that he co-wrote with the Eagles, because we would have skated frontwards, backwards in couples to things like New Kid in Town and, Heartache Tonight and all of those songs. So, but as a kid, I just loved a good song.
Oh, yeah.
I became very intoxicated with good songwriting very early on. But I grew up with people like Carole King on the radio, and James Taylor and Carly Simon, and those were people that I gravitated to, and Linda Ronstadt, who sang a lot of great songwriters, and Eagles. And then a lot of the pop singers, like, Barbara Streisand and Melissa Manchester and Bette Midler, and those people who chose great songs. So I was always tuned in on it.
Is it weird to think that you grew up loving these troubadours and these crafters of song, and now as an adult, like, you've hung out with Carly Simon, you've hung out with Linda Ronstadt, is that surreal for you, or is it just part of it?
It is always surreal for me. It is, it's just peculiar, some of the interactions I've had with a lot of people who have been my heroes. I don't know how it quite all happened that, I got to interact with so many, but that's kind of the way things happen when you move to some place like LA and you are not a wallflower. I don't stay in. I do now. But I didn't. I always was grateful to be in this environment. You know what I mean? Like, here's my favorite LA story. Like, this is LA to me. One day, I was sitting in Starbucks in West Hollywood, and this older guy sat in one of the comfy chairs next to me. And we started talking. I had a t-shirt that said Boston University, and he asked if I attended Boston University. And I said, yeah, I did. And he told me that his brother taught there. And we had a conversation about everybody in his family who had taught in these prestigious institutions in the Boston, Harvard, MIT, BU. And so as I was talking to him, I started to figure out, like, he did not. So I said, I go, it sounds to me like you didn't follow the family footsteps, that you did not become an academic or a professor or work in that field. And he says, no, I was a horse of a different stripe. He said, I became a photographer and a record producer. And so I said, did you produce any records I would have heard? He says, most of them, probably not. But my 15 minutes of fame came with American Pie by Don McLean. And so, like, that's LA, that the person sitting next to you in LA could have produced American Pie. You know what I mean? And so,
yes, LA is definitely that. I was in the Aroma coffee shop and having a cup of coffee, and there was this man sitting in the corner, and I thought, there's something about him. He had, he's wearing a nice suit type, nice button-up shirt, and he had a cravat, and, he was very distinguished looking. And it turned out to be Quinn. It turned out to be the guy that wrote The Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
What?
I go to a deli where you might see Brian Wilson of Beach Boys. You might see John Voight. You might see Michael DeBar, and like any number, like one of the guys from Kiss. It's just LA is nuts.
My ex-roommate Jen and I, we had about a 2-week streak where every day we went out, we would see someone famous. It was hilarious.
Yeah. Who have been your biggest celebrity sightings?
Oh my gosh. Okay. We saw Wendy Malick, also at Aroma. Yeah. At Aroma is been quite the hot spot. Paul Rudd was at Aroma.
That's a good one.
Yeah. All the Brady Bunch kids were at Vitalis.
All of them?
All of them. Yep.
At the same time?
Yeah. It was when I had first arrived here. I can't remember if I was living here yet, but I had first arrived here. And I was at Vitello's for lunch over in Studio City, and apparently they were filming their
reunion.
Yeah, for the
because
tear down the house.
The house was restored.
Yeah. So that was wild. I've seen Gene Simmons, Daniel Radcliffe.
These are great ones.
Yeah, tons. I mean, the list is very long. And what I love, and I would say that Nashville is also good at this. I mean, to me, celebrity is interesting in that, oh, you've got an interesting job, but you know me, I'm more interested in who you are as a person, not what you do. And so I've never been, as they call them, the star fuckers. That doesn't interest me so much. And I noticed that a lot of these people are left alone in these scenarios, which is great. It's how it was in Nashville too. Like I was in coffee shops with, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, and
they are always underfoot in Nashville.
I know. Yeah, I had lovely conversation with Naomi Judd, she's so funny. She's such a mom. She was very motherly to me and lovely, and and Garth Brooks in the guitar shop, and what I like about the famous people that don't really give a shit that they're famous. They're just like, that's what I do. That's my job. And they don't buy into their own stuff, which I think is great. I think that there is maybe a guardedness to some of them because they don't know if you're crazy, but for the most part, that's what I really appreciated about Allison Janney on the dance floor. Is she just was like, fuck it, I'm dancing. I'm at a bar with really great music and I'm going to have fun, and which is how it should be. And I don't know about you, but I find myself even getting protective of them when other people don't respect their space,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess that is a thing to navigate.
Yeah. It's interesting. The cult of celebrity is always fascinated me, and just how people react to it, which is in some ways perhaps how we've gotten into this bit of a mess in this country, is the cult of personality. But I suppose that's been growing. We can't just blame it on one season. That's been growing for a long time.
What's kind of interesting anymore is that there are other ways to be a celebrity now.
Yeah.
So, like, now you can be a celebrity on Instagram for modeling things, or you could be a celebrity on YouTube for teaching how to do makeup,
mm-hmm.
or doing talk shows or things. There are just other avenues to becoming famous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are a lot of people I just don't know anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm not tapped into all of. I mean, now you can be TikTok famous.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah. Who are some of the more memorable experiences you had? For example, you have great Carly Simon story. You have a great Linda Ronstadt. One of my most favorite people on the planet. You have hung out with Angela Lansbury, who I adore. Are there any stories you want to share with some of those people, or that you've?
Well, I think all those people. The thing is, like, for celebrity and like how I think about it, like those are really, those have been some of the biggest ones. But I kind of think like anybody who manages to make a living in the business is a celebrity. But Angela is somebody that my friend Steven knows, so I have gone to dine with her and things when she would invite him over, so I would go as his plus one, and I've had very memorable dinners where she's cooked, and they're just thinking, oh my word,
I adore her. I think she's great. For me, she's up there with Shirley MacLaine. I adore the energy and the humor and the sassiness. And I think you told me a funny Angela Lansbury story about acting, if I remember correctly, that she imparted on you.
Well, Steve, we were at some event, and Stephen had asked her how she managed to remain so gracious, meeting person after person after person, telling, story after story after story to her. And she had actually stayed at this thing for longer than she had to. So, like, basically, she had talked to anybody that wanted to say hello to her. And he's like, how did you And it's just so polite. And she goes, it's called acting. I just thought, I mean, those are things that I have learned. There's somebody else that I interacted with who, I mean, that was a little bit of a life lesson. Just that, like, it's called acting. You know, like, I, in some ways, took that to heart. And, you know, now think about that, like, in real life, you know. And there's somebody else who taught me a similar kind of lesson, another actress, Karen Black, who is no longer with us. And one thing we haven't discussed is that for 7 years, I had hosted and produced a monthly charity show, a songwriter night in LA. And it was free, and it raised money for different locally based nonprofit organizations. And we did it every month. And the second show we ever did, we had Karen Black, who I love. And she had forgotten to get a guitar player. So I ended up becoming her guitar player and her harmony singer. And, you know, when I showed up for like a week's worth of rehearsals with her to do 3 songs on my little free charity night, you know, we were going through, we were having, what is the tempo? What is the key? Where do I sing with you? What are the actual finalized lyrics and things? I made the mistake of referring to all of that entire process as rehearsal. And she says to me, and this is like, I do apply this to life. She says to me, this is not rehearsal. That is not rehearsal. You get it to as good as it can be to where you're going to perform it. And that's where rehearsal starts.
Oh, wow.
So those are the things that you, like, learn from pros. Those are the things that, because I've heard that, like, even from Angela's talked about when you show up on a set, you expect the costume designer to be an utmost professional. You expect whoever is the assistant director is going to be an utmost professional. You're expecting your co-stars to be, and when I go to work, that's what I expect, and that's what I expect to deliver. You know, when I go to work, I think I'm part of a team, and I have to make this, you know, to make it good for myself, I have to make it good for everybody. You know, and I have to anticipate, and I have to, you know, have some sort of professionalism to, you know, ensure my own, to sustain my own profession. You know?
What is your role on Amazing Race?
My title on Amazing Race is I'm an associate producer. I work with the producers and the editors and the, you know, director and executives, and we, you know, they go out, they run the race, and the footage comes back, and we turn it into 42-minute episodes. So it's, you know, like a storytelling job, and I'm a little bit, you know, I kind of prepare things. So I go through the footage with everybody else, and I sort of help determine what might be useful, what might, what are going to be.
Hold on. Sorry. The Blue Angels are going over.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow. Are you going to run outside and go see them?
No, I just, but they're going over right now. It's so loud.
Oh, I don't hear them.
They'll probably be over your neighborhood soon.
I don't hear them.
They've been going over people over different state, you know, over cities in different states. So as a thank you to the
healthcare workers.
Yes, correct. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I couldn't hear you. So again, associate producer helping the.
Yeah, no. So I'm an associate producer, and I work. It's essentially a storytelling job. I work with the editors, I work with the producers, and I work with the directors and the network to, you know, turn all of this mountain of footage into 42-minute episodes.
And how many per episode? How much footage gets wheedled down?
I mean, it is tons. I mean, it is tons because there's so many cameras. You know, it's not just one set of cameras. It is numerous, and they're just doing so many crazy things too, and you have to put it together like a whole season. So everybody is like not just thinking about their own episodes, but they're thinking about a whole season's worth of storytelling. How long are the different teams staying in, and does anything play off later on? Do certain alliances matter? Did somebody make a fatal flaw early on that's gonna take a little while to pay off? Those kinds of things. And just, you just have to have it make sense, and you have to make it be amazing. Because they're doing these amazing things. Like when you're bungee jumping off a bridge in Tanzania, or you're climbing a rock in Vietnam and rappelling down another side and then getting on a boat and, running through a cave. I mean, these are just, or you're in India and you're learning a Bollywood choreographed routine. And, I mean, these are just it's just, I marvel that it gets pulled off season after season after season, because it's just people are really challenged.
Do you know, as you're watching it, do you and your coworkers, obviously you don't know who's going to win at the end until you've done the whole arc of the show, but in the beginning, do you think, oh, I bet you so-and-so? Do you have those ideas in your mind, or do you just go tabula rasa and let it unfold for yourself as well?
Well, I mean, they go out and we all have all the footage by the time. I work in post-production, so I'm not part of the course. I'm in an office when the tapes come in. So by that time, it has been run. And, we kind of have a sense of how long people stay in and how, things play out through a whole arc.
When you're selecting contestants, what kind of fortitude are you looking? I imagine that they go through psychological testing and physical testing, and
they're vetted. They're really vetted by a casting department. I'm not really part of that. I sort of hear some of it, but they're vetted for it based on a whole bunch of different criteria. Some are scouted. They do these casting calls, and people submit, and the one thing I will say about the race is that it's harder than it looks on television, because it is so much running, it is so much physical strength, mental strength, even some of the waiting around just to get to the next place, and the transit, and then being dropped in a country where the language is so completely different, and every interaction is a challenge. It's a brilliant idea.
Which is why it's won so many Emmys.
And I mean, it's a marvel that it's pulled off every single season that it's gone. I mean, they've done so many memorable things, and been to so many places. I mean, some I've never even heard of, like Oman. I never heard of Oman until I worked on The Amazing Race.
What are your plans forthcoming? As you look, let's take the virus out of it, but where's your story arc heading?
Well, that is actually a good question, because I thought I'd be working now. And I thought that there have been a lot of different sort of speculative projects that, I've been attached to here and there. There was is a documentary project on a British rock and roll photographer named Corinthia West. It's been picked up by an Icelandic production company, and at some point I would like to be picked up with that project. I have worked with her. I've videotaped her, and kind of followed her around with just my iPhone and stuff. And so I would kind of like to be maybe working on that. I thought I'd be working now. I now am recalibrating, I suppose. Now, it's looking in on the people who need to be looked in on, doing errands for them, or making sure, things run, not just myself, older people. My plans are really now just to sustain. I mean, otherwise, I could be doing any number of things like anybody else. Like, I could be traveling, I could be in a car. If I were to take a notion to, load up some things to take to my Nashville apartment, nothing would have stopped me from doing it. But now, even that, it's like, do I even want to go there if the restrictions are maybe not so healthy? Maybe, you know what I mean? That, like, if they're opened up more liberally than we are, that might be riskier. So, like, every single thing, like, makes me just want to isolate further,
Yeah, and you do take care of a handful of people, I know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
more people than anyone I know. You know everyone, firstly.
I know a lot of people for somebody who did not move out here knowing anyone.
Right.
And somehow, a lot of that is from just like being in the songwriter community in LA. Then when I was hosting and producing Grassroots Acoustica, like, that was every month putting together lineups of people.
And you raised a lot of money with that for charity.
We never charged a cover. We never had a minimum donation, but we raised just a little bit more than $75,000 for different charities. And they were such... The real criminal thing is that I did not videotape them. I should have, because they were memorable. There were a lot of people that I admired who came through and played that little show for free. Like Gretchen Peters, great songwriter from Nashville. Like Wendy Waldman, great songwriter from out here, who also had Nashville on her resume. A lot of people who had hits when I was growing up. There's a guy named Alan O'Day who had a big hit of his own called Undercover Angel. But he also wrote a bunch of other big hits at the time, like Angie Baby and Rock and Roll Heaven. And he did our show a lot. And he was so great. He's no longer with us. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like I should have videotaped them. And actually, in his case, there was somebody who came down to see some show that Alan was on, and it turned out to be his final appearance. And this guy did videotape it from the audience. And, like, there are things, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there are things like that should have been preserved in retrospect.
Yeah.
Because that show, it wasn't necessarily... It wasn't necessarily scripted, but it was meant to be, like, themed. So, if it was, like, let's say you have albums coming out this year, I would have a lineup of people who had albums coming out. Or if you were from out of town, it would be a lineup of people out of town. Or we'd, like, get around one particular musician and, work up their catalog. So it was a little bit like a community theater, and it was great fun. It was also a little bit of like the little engine that could, because what we were always up against was like, is this venue going to close? from the beginning. So when we first started, we started in one little coffee house on Sepulveda called Synergy. And then, when that became a wine bar, we moved around. And then this place called the Talking Stick opened. And it had a perfect space, a really versatile space that we could use for acoustic shows or bigger, if we want to have a band, we could just configure it differently. And it was awesome because it was run by these people who just let us have run of it. And it wasn't just our show. It was every night of the week somebody had a show there that was great. So we settled into Talking Stick, but it was always is this place going to exist for a long time? Is there a plan B in case this place, goes out of business? But it hung on for, 5 years, 6 years. And, we did a lot of shows.
Yeah.
And they were always when you had, because it was charitable, and that kind of gave it a whole different intention than just, I'm going to play the same songs I've been playing for a long time. And so I was very, very proud of that whole series. When it was happening, we were all, because it wasn't just me, it was there were people who worked with me and made that show, the sound people and the people who ran the merch table and the people who worked on promoting it and everything, that we were like machines, and we just had that because it was okay, this one's put away, now there's next month and the month after that and the month after that. And through all of that, I met a lot of people.
How did you get involved with the World of Wonder and RuPaul folks?
Craigslist again.
Really? That was such a fun party that you took me to. I had such an amazing time that night.
Well, that was... I worked at World of Wonder Productions on a bunch of different TV shows in around 2005. And I had just started at Race. I did season 6 of Amazing Race and had wrapped for hiatus. And I had gotten hired to work on Show Dog Moms and Dads at World of Wonder. And then that led to something else, and then something else after that. And then I would go back whenever I was on hiatus from Race. But I had... What was odd about World of Wonder was, while I was first getting started there, and I was looking around at the posters of RuPaul, and I was looking around at some of these other people I was working with, I was thinking that it had some kind of familiarity to it already. I had gotten this job from a Craigslist ad, just like I had gotten Amazing Race. I had answered an ad, I'd gone to interview, but when I got hired and I was sitting at my desk and I was looking around, I thought there was something familiar. And then I realized that my best friend in Nashville, who is my neighbor in Nashville, I have a place there, he is now a professor, but he had been a drag queen in Atlanta with RuPaul. And he was and all those people were Atlanta people. And even Randy and Fenton of World of Wonder, they had a band called the Pop-Tarts. And, and they were affiliated with RuPaul from the beginning. So I put it together and I called my friend in Nashville. I said, you don't by any chance know these two guys that I'm now working for? And it all started to come together. How bizarre is that this, my best friend is tied in with this company that I now work for. I love that company.
Yeah, I love RuPaul. I watched his master class, which was fantastic. So wonderful. And Brooklyn Heights, who was on a season of Drag Race, was one of my first guests on Hey Human. So that's really a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, at this we have hosted RuPaul in this very house um, at a dinner gathering, and then before all the RuPaul Drag Race stuff, that whole series started happening, RuPaul loves games, and he used to have game nights at his house, and I used to go to them, and there was a monthly charades game at RuPaul. Like for example, you do a round where you take movie titles whose names were like sort of turned into porn titles. So like, you know, Clear and Present Danger might become like Queer and Present Stranger, or you know, Forrest Gump might become Foreskin Gump.
Yeah.
You have all these people that are, you know, acting this stuff out. And then there was one month where the party fell on Cher's birthday, so it was Cher AIDS. So all the charades had to do with Cher titles.
I was impressed by, and this seems silly because of course RuPaul would have a presence given it's RuPaul, but there is this deep well to RuPaul that is so beautiful. I was just drinking it in when I was watching the masterclass, and there's an elegance to RuPaul that's regal and yet so approachable and lovely and warm. It's a wonderful combination.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Like anytime I've interacted with RuPaul or anybody affiliate, because there were a bunch of other, you know, queens in that whole set, the club kids. You know, I never would have thought that I would have known. So, you know,
so bizarre the way the world takes our lives, right?
Because, you know, some of them worked at World of Wonder, you know, not just RuPaul.
Yeah.
James St. James, who wrote Disco Bloodbath, you know, that'd be the whole Michael Alec story. Would work in that office. And, you know,
I forgot about Michael Alec, that whole craziness.
Yeah, I know, it's all, that's the thing that's so interesting about, you know, all of these things is that their roots go so deep into things that you don't necessarily think. Like one of the things that's always been interesting to me about World of Wonder was, I guess, how they got their name was from this guy who used to go around everywhere with a camera. His name was Nelson, and this was the 80s in New York, and he'd videotape everybody. And his life's ambition was to put all of this footage together into something that made sense. He was going to call it Nelson's World of Wonder. And he had finally gotten to a point where he was going to start doing that, you know. And then he died just suddenly. And so there was this treasure trove, this archive of footage of all these figures from the club scene in New York in the 80s, and I guess Randy and Fenton put it together, and you know, it's been screened places. It's probably on YouTube, but you know what I mean. And that sort of was the beginnings of their company and the documentaries that they did early on, and the RuPaul stuff that they did early on. You know, never mind by the time I got there, but I always loved working for that company.
I met them at that party. They were lovely.
When I first started working there, my earliest memory was the buzz that was coming. I guess they were, it was Sundance, and it was Inside Deep Throat, which was a documentary that they had produced, which was great, and it had all these amazing figures in it, like giving commentary. And so it was very exciting because it wasn't just television, it was features, it was documentaries, it was, you know, this kind of buzz. And then I saw Inside Deep Throat came out, as well as on like HBO. And there was one night I was like channel surfing, and I happened upon Inside Deep Throat on HBO, and then Inside Deep Throat on HBO LT. And I was like, well, what is HBO LT? I'd never even noticed that before. So I turned it on, and it was Spanish language. And so all of these figures, like Helen Gurley Brown, and, you know, anybody else who was interviewed, they were dubbed. Like, they had to, like, go and, like, cast voices to dub all these things that these people were saying. And what I learned was that my Spanish is horrible, because I had been watching it in English until I had flipped the channel, and then I was trying to follow it in Spanish, and
Hilarious.
I was not where I should have been.
I love it. One of the things I really enjoy about hanging out with you, and we've been on a few adventures together, is that you really are a person who says yes. And I think that in a world of a lot of no and a lot of othering and a lot of, oh, that's not about you, you are so open and saying, yes, let's do this. Why not? Let's just jump in. And it's a lovely thing to be around, for sure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I try to. I mean, I do have to struggle against the impulse to say no. Because there is also the impulse to want to curl up in the fetal position and not face a lot of racket, not face a lot of noise, not face a lot of everybody's opinions or self-promotion. Like, there are some things that I, you know, do have different conventions, for example, where everybody is going to hand you a flyer and say, come to my gig, or, you know, this is my new CD, and all of those things that, you know, like, you get hit with so much of that, you know, you can't say yes to everything. But, you know, I'm also fortunate that I don't have children to look after. I have, you know, I have a job that I don't work every single day of the year. You know, like, I work 3 months on, 3 months off typically, and that kind of thing. But the gift that I wanted to give to myself as a teenager was that I wanted my life to be a unique experience, and that I wanted to surround myself with people that were, like, exciting and, like, great at everything, you know, great at what they did, experts who knew some things, who had been some places, who had some stories to tell, who had some songs to sing. And so, you know, I say yes to those kinds of things. I try to say no to things that are dreary. But I'll tell you, like, but there's no telling what I'll say yes to, because, like, for example, like, I went up to Santa Barbara to a friend of mine was doing something at the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and when I met up with her, she had an actor with her who was Belgian, and I knew this guy looked familiar to me, you know, like, I kept staring at him, and, like, then when we started chatting, I decided to, like, impress him with some of the Belgian cinema that I've taken in, because for whatever reason, like, I will say yes to anything. So I would go to see a lot of Belgian movies. And I had just seen this one. I said to him, I just saw this great one called The Ardennes that was kind of like a Tarantino movie. He goes, I was in that. Oh. You know? And then he told me his character was. I was like, that is exactly right. You know, you were him. And then, like, I brought up this other movie, and I said, like, it's this title. It always escapes me, but it used Americana music. Like, it was a story about these people, and these Belgian people. They played Americana music. It ended up being a really, really sad movie, but it had this really great music in it. I can't remember the title. It goes, I was in that too.
Do you remember it now? What was it?
I forget. It was. I have to look it up because it's like one of those titles I always forget.
Yeah.
Which is becoming, more frequent. But it was a movie I loved. And
You'll have to let me know, and then I'll put it on the links page. Yeah.
I will. Yeah. Because it was great, and the music in it is great, and the film itself. You think it's gonna go one way, and it does not. And so, in that regard, like, it's just all around excellent. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean.
Mark, how can people find you on the Facebook?
Well, you can look up Mark Islam on Facebook, or you can look up Mark Islam at Twitter.
I will put it on there. You would be a great candidate for Instagram because of all the places you go to, and I feel like...
Went.
All right, went. Sure. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed talking with you. I can't wait till I get to see you again.
I know.
Like in real life, for something fun.
It's coming again.
Hopefully that won't be deadly.
Yes. Well, let's hope not. Yes. We'll try and stay out of hospitals and morgues. How about that? We'll go do something that's a little less crazy.
That's the deal.
I love you dearly, and it's so good to see you. Thank you for being on the show. And as always, I'll go through this episode and put all the links together for things that we talked about. And when you remember that movie, you text it to me, and I'll put it up there. Yeah. Very good. I love you.
I love you back.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, everybody.